Part 1, First Contact Protocol. Rachel Morgan had been preparing for this moment for 6 months. Every simulation, every cultural briefing, every diplomatic protocol had been drilled into her mind until she could recite them in her sleep. But standing in the airlock of the Verdant Collective's orbital station, watching the doors cycle open, she felt her stomach twist with nerves that no amount of training could settle. The station's interior took her breath away. It wasn't built, it was grown. Walls of living crystal pulsed with soft bioluminescent light, shifting between blues and greens like an aurora trapped in stone. The air smelled clean, almost sterile, with a faint sweetness she couldn't quite place. Temperature-controlled mist drifted near the ceiling, probably for the comfort of species that needed higher humidity. Her escort, a tall being that resembled a walking orchid with too many limbs, gestured for her to follow. They didn't speak. The Verdant communicated primarily through pheromones and color shifts in their petals, but they'd agreed to use translators for this meeting. Small mercies. The walk to the council chamber felt endless. Rachel passed dozens of different species, each one stopping to stare at her. Some with curiosity. Others with something that looked uncomfortably like disgust. A few simply turned away, as if her presence offended them. She kept her head high and her diplomatic smile fixed in place, even as doubt crept into her thoughts. Earth needed this alliance. Humanity had finally developed faster than light travel, but they were babies in a galaxy full of civilizations that had been exploring the stars for millennia. The Verdant Collective controlled access to trade routes, resources, and knowledge that could advance human technology by centuries. Without their approval, humanity would remain isolated, struggling to expand beyond their own solar system. The council chamber was massive, easily the size of a football stadium. Delegates from over 30 species occupied tiered seating that spiraled upward like an amphitheater. At the center sat the High Council, 7 beings representing the most influential races in the collective. Rachel recognized them from her briefings: the architects with their crystalline bodies that refracted light into rainbows, the verdant elders whose bodies were ancient trees more than they were humanoid, the singers whose translucent forms rippled with sound waves, and others whose names she'd memorized but whose appearances still startled her. She took her position at the speaking platform, a circular disc that hovered just above the floor. Her hands trembled slightly, so she clasped them behind her back. Professional. Confident. Representative of an entire species. The verdant elder who served as council speaker began the formal greeting. The translator in Rachel's ear converted the cascade of musical tones and chemical signals into flat, mechanical English. She responded with the carefully rehearsed phrases, bowing at the appropriate moments, careful not to show her teeth when she smiled. Many species interpreted that as a threat display. Everything was going perfectly. Then the child appeared. Rachel didn't even see where it came from. One moment she was midway through explaining Earth's resource offerings, and the next, a small verdant child, barely 3 feet tall with bright green leaves and curious golden eyes, had wandered past the security barriers and stood directly in front of her. The council chamber went silent. Even the constant hum of translator devices seemed to pause. The child tilted its head, studying her with innocent fascination. Then it leaned forward, its petal-like sensory organs flaring wide, and asked in a high, clear voice that needed no translation. "Why do you smell like that?" Rachel's mind went blank. Of all the scenarios they'd prepared her for, this wasn't one of them. She opened her mouth, but before she could formulate a diplomatic response, the child recoiled, stumbling backward. "You smell wrong," the child said, louder now, its voice carrying through the silent chamber. "Like something dying. Like burning things." An adult verdant rushed forward, scooping up the child and bowing repeatedly toward Rachel and the council. The apologies came in a rapid burst of colors and scents that her translator struggled to keep up with. Embarrassment. Profound regret. Explanation about young ones not understanding proper behavior. But the damage was done. Rachel watched as delegates throughout the chamber shifted in their seats. Some pressed breathing apparatus closer to their faces. Others whispered to their neighbors, their various forms of communication creating a discordant symphony of alarm. The singers' bodies flickered with darker hues. The architect's crystalline forms seemed to dim. The verdant elder who'd been apologizing finally composed itself enough to speak clearly. "Ambassador Morgan, please forgive this interruption. Children do not yet have the filters adults develop. What the young one expressed, it is something we have all noticed but have been too polite to mention." Rachel felt eyes spread through her chest. "I don't understand." The elder's leaves rustled with what might have been discomfort. Humans carry a chemical signature that is disturbing to most species in the collective. Your metabolism produces compounds that register to our sensory organs as markers of decay, oxidation, and predation. To put it simply, Ambassador, you smell like death. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Rachel looked around the chamber at hundreds of alien faces, and suddenly understood every uncomfortable glance, every delegate who turned away, every barrier of invisible hostility she'd felt since arriving. It wasn't politics. It wasn't cultural misunderstanding. They were afraid of how she smelled. Part 2, The Explanation. Rachel stood frozen on the platform, her carefully prepared speech forgotten. Around her, the council chamber buzzed with uncomfortable whispers and shifting bodies. Some delegates had actually moved to seats farther from the center. The child's innocent question had cracked open a truth everyone had been too diplomatic to mention, and now it sat between them like a wall. She could walk away. Return to Earth and report that humanity's biology itself was the barrier to joining galactic civilization. Let someone else figure out how to solve a problem written into their DNA. But that wasn't who Rachel was. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. Then she reached into her jacket and pulled out a small data chip. Her hands were steady now, driven by something fiercer than nerves. If they were going to reject humanity, it wouldn't be because she gave up without a fight. Council members, she said, her voice clear and strong. I request permission to explain. The verdant elder exchanged looks with the other council leaders. Finally, they gestured agreement. Rachel inserted the chip into the platform's interface, and the air above her shimmered to life with holographic images. Earth appeared first, rotating slowly. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in familiar patterns. It looked peaceful from space, almost gentle. But Rachel knew better. This is my world, she began. To understand why humans smell the way we do, you need to understand where we came from. She gestured, and the image zoomed closer, showing ancient landscapes. Earth isn't like most worlds that produced intelligent life. Our atmosphere is 21% oxygen. Do you know what that means? She looked around the chamber. Most species here came from worlds with thin atmospheres or ones dominated by nitrogen and carbon dioxide. A few used methane. The singers didn't even breathe in any conventional sense. It means our planet is basically soaked in rocket fuel, Rachel continued. Oxygen is incredibly reactive. It wants to combine with everything it touches. It rusts iron. It feeds fires. It breaks down organic matter. Our world is essentially a tinderbox that's been burning for billions of years. The hologram shifted, showing Earth's ancient history. Volcanic eruptions. Meteors striking the surface. Ice sheets grinding continents flat. The images weren't pretty or peaceful. They showed a planet that tested everything that tried to live on it. My ancestors didn't evolve on a gentle world, Rachel said. Every few thousand years, the climate would shift. Ice ages would cover half the planet, or volcanic eruptions would block out the sun for years. Predators the size of your transport ships hunted anything that moved. Diseases swept through populations. Food was never guaranteed. She pulled up images of human evolution. Not the sanitized versions from textbooks, but archaeological evidence. Bones showing healed fractures. Signs of malnutrition. Entire species of human cousins that didn't survive. We almost went extinct. Multiple times. There's genetic evidence that the entire human population once dropped to maybe 10,000 individuals. 10,000, on an entire planet. We should have died out. The singer's forms rippled with what might have been surprise. Even the stoic architects seemed to lean forward slightly. So why didn't we? Rachel asked. Because we evolved something desperate. Something dangerous. She brought up a new image, showing the inside of a human cell. This is hemoglobin. It's an iron-based molecule that grabs oxygen from our lungs and carries it through our blood to every cell in our bodies. She zoomed in further, showing the molecular structure. And then, in tiny structures called mitochondria, we do something most species would consider insane. We burn it. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Several delegates spoke urgently to their neighbors. Not like fire, Rachel clarified. But it's the same basic chemistry. We combine oxygen with sugars and fats in a controlled reaction that releases energy. It's called cellular respiration, and it happens billions of times per second in every human body. We are literally made of tiny controlled explosions. The verdant elder's leaves had gone pale. You burn fuel inside your own bodies. Every moment of every day, Rachel confirmed. It's incredibly efficient. It lets us generate enormous amounts of energy. It's why humans can run for hours, why we can survive in almost any climate, why we heal from injuries that would kill other species. But it comes with a cost. She brought up chemical formulas, keeping them simple. The byproducts of our metabolism include carbon dioxide, water, and oxidized compounds. Things that smell like decay because, chemically, they are similar. The iron in our blood oxidizes, rusts, essentially, as it carries oxygen. We sweat out acids and salts. We exhale waste that your senses probably register as toxic. Rachel paused, looking directly at the small verdant child, who was peeking out from behind its parent. You asked why I smell like burning and dying things. It's because I'm doing both, constantly, just to stay alive. Every breath I take is fire. Every heartbeat is an explosion. I smell like death because I carry it inside me. The silence that followed was different now. Not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. Concerned. A council member from a crystalline species spoke up, their voice chiming like bells. This seems incredibly dangerous. How do you control such volatile processes? Rachel smiled, and this time she didn't hide her teeth. Millions of years of practice. Our bodies are machines designed to manage controlled chaos. We have fail-safes, redundant systems, ways to cool ourselves when we burn too hot, ways to generate heat when we're cold. We're not just burning, we're conducting a symphony of chemical reactions that keeps us alive in conditions that would kill most species here. She gestured, and the hologram showed humans in different environments. Deserts. Arctic tundra. Deep jungles. High mountains. This metabolism, this dangerous burning process you're worried about, it's the reason humans can survive anywhere. We've lived in every climate on Earth. We've adapted to extremes that would be impossible for species with more stable, gentler biology. The verdant elder was quiet for a long moment. You're saying your apparent weakness is actually your strength. I'm saying we evolved on a world that tried to kill us in every way possible, Rachel replied. And we learned to take the most dangerous substance on our planet, oxygen, and make it the foundation of our survival. Yes, we smell like death. But that smell is the scent of life that refused to give up, no matter how many times the universe tried to snuff it out. She looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes and sensory organs as she could. I can't change my biology to make you comfortable. None of us can. But I can tell you this, the fire that burns inside us also drives us. It's why we reached for the stars. It's why we're here, asking to join you, instead of staying home where it's safe. The chamber fell silent again. Rachel stood straight, waiting for judgment, knowing she'd given humanity's best defense. They were dangerous, yes. They smelled of death, yes. But they were survivors. And maybe, just maybe, the galaxy needed that kind of fire. Rachel's presentation to the council had ended 2 hours ago, and she still didn't know if it had helped or made things worse. The delegates had dispersed without giving any indication of their decision, leaving her alone in the guest quarters the station had provided. The room was beautiful in an alien way, with walls that shifted colors based on her mood and furniture that adjusted itself to human proportions. But it felt like a gilded cage. She was staring out the viewport at the planet below when her door chimed. The security system identified the visitor as a single entity, non-threatening. Rachel opened the door and immediately stepped back in surprise. Standing in the corridor was an architect. Not just any architect, but one of the ancient ones. She could tell by the complexity of the crystalline structure, the way light seemed to bend and fracture through its body in patterns that hurt to look at directly. This being was old. Really old. Ambassador Morgan, the architect said, its voice like wind chimes in a storm. I apologize for the late hour. May I enter? What I have to show you cannot wait until morning. Rachel's training screamed caution, but something in the architect's tone made her step aside. The being glided into her quarters, and she noticed a second figure following behind. A human. Male, probably in his 30s, with the kind of alert posture that said military or security. I'm Tyler Grant, the man said, offering his hand. I'm with your delegation's protection detail. The architect requested I be present as a witness to what they're about to share. Rachel shook his hand, grateful to see another human face, then turned to the architect. What's this about? The architect's body pulsed with deep blue light, a color Rachel had learned meant serious concern. Your explanation to the council today triggered something in our historical archives. Records that have been sealed for over 50,000 years. Records that I, as a keeper of deep memory, am sworn to protect and only reveal when necessary. It raised one crystalline limb, and suddenly the room filled with holographic data. Ancient symbols scrolled past, mixed with images that flickered and degraded as if the files themselves were barely holding together. 50,000 years ago, the architect began, my people were not part of any collective. We were explorers, young and curious, mapping the galaxy. And we found something that terrified us so badly, we stopped exploring for 10,000 years. Rachel felt her pulse quicken. Tyler moved closer, his eyes scanning the holographic data. The architect gestured, and the symbols coalesced into an image. It showed a starship, but not like any design Rachel had seen. It was organic and mechanical at once, with lines that seemed to blur between the two. And it was massive, easily the size of a small moon. We found derelict ships, the architect continued. Hundreds of them, scattered across a sector of space we now call the burn zone. No life aboard. No bodies. Just empty vessels and automated warnings in a language we spent decades learning to decode. More images appeared. Ruins on dead planets. Structures that defied physics. Technology that the architects, even with their advanced knowledge, couldn't understand. The species that built these things called themselves. The architect paused, as if searching for the right translation, the forerunners. Or perhaps the precursors. The translation is imprecise. But the warnings they left behind were very clear. A new hologram appeared, showing what looked like a biological scan. Rachel leaned forward, her scientific training kicking in. The cellular structure looked almost familiar, but wrong in ways she couldn't quite articulate. They described themselves as beings who burned like stars, the architect said quietly. Who could remake worlds with their touch. Who carried fire within their bodies and used it to transform everything around them. Tyler whistled low. That sounds like the explanation you gave today, the architect finished, turning to Rachel. When you described human metabolism, our translation systems flagged similarities to these ancient records. The chemical signatures match. The biological processes are nearly identical. The forerunners breathed oxygen. They metabolized through oxidation. They generated enormous energy through internal combustion. Rachel felt cold despite the room's comfortable temperature. You're saying humans are related to these forerunners? I don't know, the architect admitted. But the coincidence is too great to ignore. And there's more. The hologram shifted, showing what looked like a star chart. But some of the stars were marked with symbols that pulsed red. The forerunners didn't just disappear, the architect explained. According to their own records, they transcended. They had become so advanced, so powerful, that they could no longer exist in normal spacetime. They burned too bright, consumed too much energy, changed too much around them. So they left. Left for where? Tyler asked. The records don't say. Perhaps another dimension. Perhaps they simply evolved beyond physical form. But before they went, they left warnings. The architect's entire body flashed bright white, a sign of extreme agitation. They warned that their biology was dangerous. That any species following the same evolutionary path would face the same temptation to transcend, to burn brighter and brighter until they could no longer coexist with normal matter. Rachel stared at the data, her mind racing. But humans haven't transcended. We're still very much physical. Yes, the architect agreed. Which means either you're not truly following their path, or you're at the beginning of it. And that's what frightens the Council, Ambassador. It's not just that you smell like death. It's that you smell like the species that once reshaped entire star systems and then vanished, leaving only warnings behind. Tyler crossed his arms. These warnings. What exactly did they say? The architect brought up one final hologram. Ancient text appeared, and Rachel's translator worked overtime to convert it into English. The words sent shivers down her spine. Beware those who carry fire within. They will remake all they touch, not from malice, but from nature. They cannot help but transform, consume, evolve. If you find such beings in their youth, guide them carefully. For they walk the same path we did, and the galaxy is not ready for another species that burns like gods. The room fell silent. Rachel looked at Tyler, who looked just as stunned as she felt. So what happens now? Rachel asked quietly. The architect's colors shifted to a softer blue. Now, I present this to the council. They will debate whether humans are a threat or an opportunity. Whether your species should be welcomed, contained, or avoided entirely. It paused. But I needed you to know first. To understand what you're really facing. This isn't just about trade routes or diplomatic relations anymore. What is it about? Tyler demanded. The architect turned toward the door, its crystalline body catching the light one last time. It's about whether the galaxy is ready for another species that could one day burn bright enough to transcend reality itself. And whether you humans are ready to carry that burden. It left without another word, leaving Rachel and Tyler standing in her quarters surrounded by the fading holograms of an ancient, vanished civilization that might have been humanity's long-lost cousins. Rachel walked back to the viewport, looking at the stars with new eyes. Somewhere out there, the Forerunners had burned so brightly they'd left the universe behind. And humanity smelled just like them. The Council's decision came the next morning, delivered by a junior Verdant official who seemed relieved to drop off the data pad and leave quickly. Rachel read the message 3 times, each time hoping she'd misunderstood. She hadn't. They want us to do what? Tyler asked, reading over her shoulder. Survive, Rachel said flatly. They're sending us to a quarantined world called Ashfall. If we can establish a stable presence there for 72 hours with minimal equipment, they'll reconsider our application. Tyler took the pad and scrolled through the planetary data. His expression darkened with each line. This is insane. Surface temperature averages 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The atmosphere is 30% sulfur dioxide. Active volcanism across 80% of the landmass. Rachel, nothing lives there. The collective evacuated their research team 6 months ago after 3 of them died even with full environmental suits. I know, Rachel said quietly. She'd already run the numbers in her head. Ashfall had been a promising colony world until a series of supervolcanic eruptions turned it into a hellscape. The collective had written it off as uninhabitable for at least 1,000 years. Now they wanted to use it as humanity's test. This isn't a test, Tyler said, his voice hard. This is a polite way of getting rid of us. They are hoping we'll refuse or fail, and they can reject our application without feeling guilty about it. Rachel looked at him steadily. So we don't fail. Within 6 hours, Rachel had assembled a team. Tyler was the obvious choice for security and survival expertise. She added Lisa Chen, a biologist who'd spent 5 years studying extremophile organisms in Earth's harshest environments. Daniel Brooks came on board as their engineer, a quiet man with a gift for making broken things work with whatever materials were available. And finally, Amy Rodriguez, a geologist who specialized in volcanic systems and had literally written the book on predicting eruptions. The collective provided them with a basic landing shuttle, emergency rations for 3 days, standard camping equipment, and environmental suits with 72 hours of life support. Nothing more. Several council members came to watch them depart, and Rachel couldn't help noticing that most looked like they were attending a funeral. The small verdant child was there too, holding its parent's hand. As Rachel walked toward the shuttle, it broke free and ran up to her. Are you going to die? The child asked with heartbreaking innocence. Rachel knelt down to its level. I'm going to show your people what humans can do. Watch and see. The descent to Ashfall was rougher than any landing Rachel had experienced. The atmosphere churned with sulfuric acid clouds, and volcanic ash created turbulence that threw them around like dice in a cup. Through the viewport, she watched the surface resolve into a nightmare landscape of black stone, rivers of lava, and volcanic cones spewing ash into the poisonous sky. Landing zone is clear, Daniel reported, though his hands were white-knuckled on the controls. Or as clear as anywhere on this rock gets. They touched down on a plateau of cooled lava, the shuttle's legs sinking slightly into the unstable surface. The external temperature reading made Lisa whistle. 146 degrees. The collective wasn't exaggerating. Suits on, Tyler ordered. Nobody goes outside until we've done a full environmental assessment. But Rachel was already studying the data streaming in from their external sensors. The air was technically breathable if you didn't mind sulfur dioxide levels that would sear your lungs. The radiation was higher than Earth normal but not immediately lethal. The ground was hot enough to cook food on but not hot enough to melt their equipment. It's survivable, she said, surprising herself. Not comfortable, but survivable. They spent the first hour in their suits, setting up a base camp inside a lava tube Daniel had spotted from orbit. The cave provided shelter from the worst of the heat and the ash rain that fell constantly. Tyler rigged a filtration system at the entrance using spare parts from the shuttle and layers of torn fabric to screen out the larger particles. Air quality inside the tube is actually decent, Lisa reported, checking her instruments. The sulfur dioxide levels drop significantly once you're away from direct atmospheric exposure. We could breathe in here, though I wouldn't recommend it long-term. Rachel made the call. Suits stay on when we're outside, but we can remove helmets inside the cave. We need to conserve the suit batteries. The second challenge was water. The emergency rations included water for 3 days, but Rachel knew establishing a source was critical for proving they could sustain themselves. Amy took the lead, hiking deeper into the lava tube system with Tyler as her escort. They returned 2 hours later with unexpected news. "There's a geothermal spring about half a kilometer in," Amy said, her face flushed with excitement despite the heat. "The water's hot, probably near boiling, and it's definitely contaminated with minerals and sulfur compounds. But it's water." Daniel got to work immediately, building a distillation system using parts from their camping equipment and sheets of metal salvaged from non-essential shuttle components. By nightfall, not that you could really tell day from night through the ash clouds, they had their first container of clean water. "It tastes like we boiled it in old pennies," Lisa said, making a face. "But it won't kill us." The real test came on day 2 when their food situation became urgent. The emergency rations were meant to last 3 days, but Tyler had done the math and realized they'd been shorted. Whether intentionally or by accident, they only had enough for maybe 48 hours if they stretched it. "We need to find food," Rachel announced at their morning meeting. "On a volcanic wasteland?" Daniel asked skeptically. But Lisa had been exploring with her scientific equipment, and her findings were fascinating. "Life finds a way," she said, pulling up images on her tablet. "I found bacterial mats near the geothermal vents. Extremophiles similar to the ones we discovered around deep-sea vents on Earth. And where there are bacteria, there's usually something eating the bacteria." She'd found small arthropod-like creatures living in the cooler sections of the lava tubes. They weren't much to look at, barely the size of a thumb, with hard shells that protected them from the heat. But they were alive, and they were organic. "You're not seriously suggesting we eat those," Tyler said. "I'm suggesting we test them," Lisa corrected. "If they are protein-based and non-toxic, they are food." It took her 6 hours of analysis, but Lisa finally gave the verdict. "They're safe. The protein structure is different from Earth organisms, but our digestive system should handle it. They'll taste terrible, but they'll keep us alive." That night, they roasted the strange creatures over a heating element, and Rachel forced herself to take the first bite. Lisa was right. They tasted awful, like burned rubber mixed with battery acid. But they were food, and more importantly, they proved a point. Humans could find sustenance even here, in hell. By day 3, they'd established a routine. Morning, collect water from the spring and run it through distillation. Afternoon, gather the arthropods and tend to their equipment. Evening, reinforce their shelter and monitor the volcanic activity that rumbled constantly beneath their feet. The collective had been watching through orbital satellites the entire time. Rachel made sure they saw everything. She wanted them to witness humans adapting to a world that should have killed them in hours. On the final evening, as they prepared to leave Ashfall, Amy made an unexpected discovery. She'd been studying the volcanic patterns and noticed something odd in the mineral composition of the rocks near their camp. "This is weird," she said, showing Rachel a sample. "These deposits contain rare earth elements in concentrations I've never seen. If this is representative of the whole planet, Ashfall isn't a dead world. It's a treasure trove." Rachel stared at the rock, then at the hellish landscape outside their cave. The collective had written this world off as worthless and uninhabitable. But humans saw it differently. They saw challenges to overcome, resources to harvest, potential where others saw only death. As their shuttle lifted off, Rachel looked back at the small camp they'd built. 3 days of proving that human metabolism, that dangerous burning fire inside them, wasn't a weakness. It was exactly what made them survivors. Tyler sat beside her, exhausted but grinning. "Think we passed their test?" Rachel thought about the verdant child's question. "Are you going to die?" "We did better than pass," she said. "We showed them what it means to carry fire inside you and use it to bring life to dead worlds." Below them, Ashfall continued to burn. But now it had been touched by humans, and nothing would ever be quite the same. The council chamber was packed when Rachel returned. Word had spread throughout the station about the human team's success on Ashfall, and it seemed like every species in the collective wanted to witness what would happen next. The viewing galleries were filled to capacity, and Rachel spotted delegates who hadn't bothered attending the first session now crowding in to see the conclusion. She walked to the center platform flanked by Tyler, Lisa, Daniel, and Amy. They were still covered in volcanic ash despite their best efforts to clean up. Their clothes were torn and stained. They smelled of sulfur and sweat. But they walked with their heads high, and Rachel noticed something different in how the delegates looked at them now. The disgust was still there in some faces, but it was mixed with something else. Respect, maybe. Or fear. The verdant elder called the session to order, and the chamber fell silent. Rachel could feel hundreds of eyes and sensory organs focused on her team. Ambassador Morgan, the elder began, its leaves rustling with an emotion Rachel couldn't quite read. You and your team survived 72 hours on Ashfall. This is unprecedented. No species in the collective has managed to establish any presence on that world since the volcanic catastrophe began. We have reviewed the satellite footage of your activities, and we have questions. Here it comes, Rachel thought. The real interrogation. A council member from the Singers, their translucent body rippling with deep purple hues, spoke first. You removed your environmental suits. You breathed the contaminated air. You consumed native organisms without extensive testing. By our safety protocols, you should have died within hours. Yet you thrived. How? Rachel glanced at Lisa, who stepped forward. Because our bodies are designed for it, the biologist said simply. The sulfur dioxide levels on Ashfall are high, but not beyond what human lungs can filter for limited periods. Our metabolism generates enough heat that the temperature was uncomfortable but manageable. And our digestive systems are built to handle a wide variety of proteins because Earth forced us to be adaptable eaters. You make it sound simple, the singer said. But we lost 3 researchers on that world. Trained scientists with advanced equipment. With respect, Lisa replied, your researchers were trying to maintain their home environment in a hostile place. We adapted to the environment instead. That's what humans do. We don't fight nature, we learn to work with it, no matter how extreme it is. Another council member, one of the crystalline architects, chimed in. You discovered rare earth deposits during your stay. Did you know about these resources before accepting the challenge? Daniel answered this time, his voice steady. We had no idea. We were too busy trying to survive to think about mining operations. But yeah, we noticed. That world you've written off as dead? It's sitting on enough valuable minerals to power your collective for centuries. You just couldn't see it because you were too busy trying to escape instead of adapt. A murmur ran through the chamber. Rachel saw delegates conferring with their neighbors, and the mood was shifting. She couldn't tell if it was in their favor or not. The verdant elder raised a limb for silence. The keepers have shared with us the ancient records of the Forerunners. We have studied the warnings they left behind about species that burn like stars. After seeing what you accomplished on Ashfall, the council is divided. Some believe you represent exactly the danger the Forerunners warned about. Others believe you represent an opportunity. Rachel had been waiting for this moment. She'd spent the entire shuttle ride back preparing what she would say, and now the words came easily because they were true. Council members, she began, her voice carrying through the vast chamber. 3 days ago, a child asked me a simple question. Why do I smell like that? I gave a scientific answer about metabolism and oxygen and cellular respiration. But that wasn't the real answer. The real answer is much simpler. She gestured to her team. We smell like this because we're survivors. Earth didn't give us the option of being gentle or peaceful or stable. It threw everything at us. Ice ages, droughts, predators, diseases, volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun. We survived because we learned to take the most dangerous substance on our planet and make it the foundation of our existence. Rachel walked to the edge of the platform, closer to the council. You're afraid we're like the Forerunners. That we'll burn too bright and either transcend or destroy everything around us. And maybe that fear is justified. Maybe we are walking the same path they did. But here's what you need to understand, we're not there yet. We're still learning. We're still young. And we're asking for your help to make sure we don't make their mistakes. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the constant hum of translator devices seemed to have paused. The Forerunners left warnings, Rachel continued. But they also left advice. They said if you find beings like us in our youth, guide us carefully. Well, here we are. Young, dangerous, carrying fire inside us. You can turn us away and hope we don't become a threat. Or you can guide us. Teach us. Help us learn to control the fire instead of being consumed by it. Amy stepped forward, holding up the rock sample from Ashfall. We went to a world you abandoned and found treasure. Not because we're better than you, but because we see challenges differently. Our dangerous biology makes us look for solutions in places you've written off. Imagine what we could accomplish working together. Tyler added his voice. You're afraid of what we might become. But we're afraid too. We know what we're capable of. We've seen what happens when humans lose control, when the fire burns too hot. That's exactly why we're here, asking to join you instead of going alone into the galaxy. We know we need guidance. The verdant child suddenly broke free from its parent again, running down to the platform. Security moved to intercept, but the elder waved them off. The child stopped in front of Rachel, looking up at her with those curious golden eyes. "You still smell scary," the child said honestly. "But you also smell brave." Rachel knelt down, smiling. "Thank you. And you smell like growing things in sunlight. Different isn't bad. It's just different." The child tilted its head, thinking. Then it reached out one small leafy hand. Rachel took it gently, and the child didn't pull away. "See?" the child said, turning to look at its parent and the council. "It doesn't hurt to touch them. They're just different." From the mouth of a child, Rachel thought. Sometimes the simplest truths are the most powerful. The architect who had shown Rachel the ancient records rose from its seat. Its crystalline body caught the light, scattering rainbows across the chamber. "I have studied the Forerunners for 3,000 years. I have analyzed their technology, their biology, their final messages. And I believe Ambassador Morgan is correct. The Forerunners transcended because they had no one to guide them, no one to show them there were other paths. They burned alone." It turned to address the full council. "The warnings speak of danger, yes. But the final message, the one written in the deepest archives, says this: if you find others like us, do not fear them. Guide them. For they have the potential to either light the galaxy or burn it down, and the difference lies in whether they walk their path alone or with friends beside them." The chamber erupted in discussion. Delegates argued, colors flashed, sounds cascaded through the air. Rachel stood still, the small verdant child's hand still in hers, and waited. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the verdant elder raised both limbs for silence. The council had reached a decision. "Ambassador Rachel Morgan," the elder said formally. "On behalf of the Verdant Collective, we grant humanity provisional membership. You will have access to trade routes, knowledge archives, and diplomatic protections. In exchange, you will share your unique perspectives and abilities with the collective, and you will accept guidance from elder species as you navigate the challenges of your dangerous biology." Relief flooded through Rachel, but the elder wasn't finished. "There is one additional condition. The council wishes humanity to take on a special role. You will become guides of survival. When other species face environments they cannot adapt to, when worlds seem too hostile for habitation, when challenges appear insurmountable, you will teach them what you taught us on Ashfall. How to adapt. How to survive. How to transform death into life." Rachel looked at her team. They were exhausted, filthy, and grinning like idiots. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd proven that humanity's dangerous biology wasn't a curse but a gift the galaxy needed. "We accept," Rachel said. "With honor and gratitude." The verdant child squeezed her hand. "Does this mean you'll teach me how to smell brave too?" Rachel laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine. "I'll teach you something better. I'll teach you that being different is what makes us all stronger. You smell like sunlight. I smell like fire. Together, we can help things grow in places nothing has grown before." As the council chamber erupted in the collective's version of applause, a symphony of colors, sounds, and movements, Rachel thought about the long road ahead. Humanity would face challenges. They would make mistakes. The fire inside them would always be dangerous. But they wouldn't burn alone. They would burn together with friends who understood that sometimes, the most dangerous things in the universe are also the most necessary. Fire destroys, yes. But it also warms. It also lights the darkness. It also transforms. And humanity, with their controlled explosions and their smell of death, would teach the galaxy how to tend the flame without being consumed by it. The small verdant child looked up at Rachel one more time. "Thank you for smelling like that. It means there's hope." Rachel smiled. "No, little one. Thank you for asking about it. Sometimes the scariest questions lead to the most important answers." And in that moment, watching the council celebrate humanity's acceptance, Rachel understood what her species' true purpose in the galaxy would be. Not conquerors. Not warriors. But survivors who could teach others how to find life in the deadest places, how to adapt to the impossible, how to carry fire inside and use it to light the way for others. They smelled like the gods who made them, like Earth itself, with all its violence and beauty and impossible tenacity. And the galaxy, for all its age and wisdom, had never smelled anything quite like it.